For the first time in 3 years, the headlines are practically shouting it from the rooftops. Australian house prices are falling. Sydney down 3.2% last quarter, Melbourne down 2.6%, the sharpest national drop since 2022. So surely, finally, this is the moment renting stops making sense and buying wins again. Except here's the thing, nobody puts in the headline. Prices falling and buying getting cheaper are two completely different animals. And right now, only one of those two things is actually happening. So let me tell you exactly what you'll walk away with. By the end of this, you'll know what renting versus buying genuinely costs in 2026. The real gap between a weekly rent and a monthly mortgage. What your deposit actually does on each side of the fence. And the one number that decides which option wins for you specifically. Not a bumper sticker, not your uncle's opinion at Christmas, your own break even. Stick with me, because this one surprises people. Here's the bit both sides of this argument conveniently forget. You've heard rent money is dead money. You've also heard buying always wins in the end. Both of those are half-truths, and half a truth is just a whole fib wearing a nice shirt. Because the biggest cost of buying a house isn't the house, it's the interest. And with the average owner-occupier variable rate now sitting at about 6.2%, the interest alone in those early years can quietly cost you more than a renter pays in rent. Keep that in your back pocket because it changes everything that comes next. So let's put these two in the ring and go round by round. In the blue corner, the buyer. In the red corner, the renter. Same income, same dream, very different maths. Round one, the starting line, and that means the deposit. Our buyer wants the national median home, which right now is about $942,000, though it's been quietly slipping every month this year. A 20% deposit on that is roughly $188,000. That's not a number you find down the back of the couch. And the moment they hand it over, that entire chunk is locked inside one single illiquid asset that is currently going down in value. Our renter takes that same $188,000 and does absolutely nothing heroic with it. They just keep it. Liquid, flexible, and not currently shrinking. Round one is a lot closer than the headline led you to believe. Round two, the monthly bill, and this is where jaws hit the floor. Our buyer borrows the other $754,000. At 6.2% over 30 years, that's a repayment of around $4,600 a month. And here's the cruel part. In year one, the overwhelming majority of that is interest. You're not buying the house yet, you're renting the money to buy the house. Our renter, meanwhile, pays the national median rent, which just hit a record $705 a week. Call it about $3,050 a month. So right now, today, the renter is paying roughly $1,500 a month less than the buyer. That's the part the dead money crowd very politely skips over. If that monthly gap just made your eyebrows climb up towards your hairline, do me a favor and drop the word gap in the comments and tell me which corner you're in right now. Renting or paying one of these things off. I genuinely want to see the split. Round three, and this is the round that earns this video its title. Which dead money is actually deader? Everyone loves saying, rent is money you never see again. Fair enough. Our renter hands over about $36,500 a year to a landlord and never sees it again. Gone. But now look at our buyer. That first year, the interest alone on their loan is roughly $46,000 handed straight to the bank, and you never see that again either. It doesn't build you a single brick of equity. Then add council rates, insurance, and the maintenance fairy who visits every time a hot water system decides to die on a long weekend. Budget another $8,000 to $10,000 a year for that lot. So the buyer's money that vanishes into thin air, interest plus all the running costs, is actually running higher than the renter's entire rent. Both of them have dead money. The buyer's corpse is just bigger. Nobody, and I mean nobody, frames it that way at a Sunday barbecue. Round four, and this is where the fight is really won or lost over 5 years. Let me make it real with two mates. Both had the same $188,000. One bought, one rented. 5 years on, the buyer has slowly clawed back a sliver of equity paying down the principal. But they did it on a house that's been flat to falling. And if they sell, the agent takes a cut, and that stamp duty they paid on the way in is long gone. Now the renter. They didn't just keep their $188,000 sitting in a shoebox. They put it somewhere plain and boring and broad, like a low-cost index fund. And if it earned even 6 or 7% a year, it's been quietly compounding the whole time. On top of that, remember our renter had about $1,500 a month spare that the buyer was pouring into interest, so some of that got invested too. 5 years of returns, a fatter pile, and the freedom to move cities next Tuesday if they felt like it. That is exactly why, over shorter stretches, renting can genuinely beat buying. This round swings entirely, completely 100% on one thing: time. Which brings us to the bit almost nobody actually calculates before they sign away the next 30 years of their life. It's called your break-even horizon, and it's the single most important number in this entire debate. Here's why. The buyer doesn't just pay for the house, they pay a small fortune in one-off costs to get in and out. Stamp duty on a $900,000-ish place can run into the tens of thousands, and it changes depending on which state you're in. So check your own before you take my word for it. Add conveyancing, building inspections, lender's costs going in, and the agent's commission going out. All of that is dead money too, and the only way you ever claw it back is by staying put long enough for your equity and long-term growth to outrun it. In a flat or falling market with rates up around 6%, that break-even point has stretched way out. On the numbers we just ran, it can easily be somewhere in the back half of a decade before buying finally overtakes renting and investing the difference. Now, before every homeowner watching starts hurling a snag at the telly, let me say the part that too often gets left off the other side of the ledger, because buying absolutely can win. And when it does win, it wins big. Here's what happens after that break-even year. Something quietly flips. Every repayment starts buying you a bigger slice of the actual house instead of just renting money from the bank. The interest bill shrinks a little every year. Your equity grows a little faster every year. And then, one glorious day, the mortgage is simply gone. Paid off. Finished. Your housing cost drops to near enough nothing. Rent, on the other hand, never ends. It never gets paid off, and it goes up roughly every single year for the rest of your life. Fast forward 25 years and our buyer could be sitting in a fully paid off home worth well over $1 million, while our renter is still writing a check every month to a landlord at whatever the market decides rent should be by then. That right there is how buying a home has quietly built wealth for generations of Australians. It just doesn't do it overnight. It does it slowly, boringly over decades, which is precisely why the short-term maths look so brutal and the long-term maths look so good. So here's the honest rule, and it's the exact opposite of what the falling price headlines are nudging you toward. If you are genuinely confident you'll stay in that home well beyond your break-even year, then yes, buying still wins, comfortably. Bricks and mortar are a wonderful thing when you hold them long enough. But if there's a real chance you'll move in a few years, a new job, a growing family, a relationship that goes sideways, then buying in 2026 can quietly cost you more than renting ever would. And here's the sting in the tail. Falling prices make that worse, not better, because now you're risking selling into the dip. A falling market was never a buy signal. It was always a how long are you staying signal. People just heard the word cheaper and stopped listening. So here's your actual move, and this is general information, not advice about your personal situation. Before one more falling price headline talks you into anything, sit down and work out your own break-even year. Add up your real upfront costs, your stamp duty, your buying costs. Estimate your first year of interest. Then stack the true annual cost of owning against what you pay in rent right now, plus what your deposit could reasonably earn if you invested it instead. If you'll comfortably still be living there past your break-even year, buying is likely your winner. If you're honestly not sure where you'll be in 5 years, then renting is not the miserable failure everyone at the barbecue tells you it is. So if you remember one thing from all of this, make it this. Buying isn't automatically the smart move. Renting isn't automatically the cheap one. Time is what decides. It was never really rent versus buy. It was time versus everything else. Prices dipping about 1% hasn't made buying cheaper while rates sit up near 6 and rents climb near 6 right alongside them. The whole game comes down to how long you're staying put, not what this month's headline is screaming. And if you've decided buying genuinely is your move, then the very next question is how much house you can actually afford now that higher rates have taken a chainsaw to everyone's borrowing power. Because that number has shifted more than you'd think, and that's exactly what we're running through next.